In the wake of a dramatic row between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelenskyy at the White House, leaders around the world have offered forceful reactions, including Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who posted, "Canada will continue to stand with Ukraine and Ukrainians in achieving a just and lasting peace." German Chancellor Olaf Scholz wrote, "No one wants peace more than the citizens of Ukraine." The EU's top diplomat, Kaja Kallas, offered, "The free world needs a new leader." Meanwhile, from Russia, former President Dmitry Medvedev called the verbal barrage a brutal dressing down in the Oval Office. All right, let's bring in Benjamin Tallis, Director of the Democratic Strategy Initiative and an expert on Ukrainian European security and defence. Benjamin, welcome. Firstly, what were you thinking watching a pre-meeting discussion devolve into a two-on-one shouting match?
Well, good morning and nice to be with you. It was a hard watch for anyone who cares about freedom, anyone who cares about the future of the free world, frankly speaking. And to bridge that chasm, as your reporter described it, between Zelensky's dignity and the disgrace that Trump has brought on the United States will be hard. But let me say this, from the very beginning of the full-scale invasion, Volodymyr Zelenskyy has shown himself not only to be a hero, but to be someone who does the best for his people and his country. And if that means making up with Trump in order to get the support he needs, he would do it, however unlikely that is at the moment.
Yeah, Zelenskyy says for his part that relations with Trump can be salvaged. Can they be? Or is it more the point that they simply must be repaired?
It's not the case they must be, because there are alternatives. And the question of salvaging that would very much depend on the terms on which it was given. What I hope this has taught us all is that Ukraine is not willing to accept a deal at any price. It's not willing to sell out its own people and its own future to the bullying of a stronger power. It wasn't willing to do that to Russia. It's not willing to do that to Trump's United States. If it were to be repaired, it would be because of a massive turnaround in Trump's opinion and Trump's position. So moving to strongly support Ukraine to win. But I honestly don't think that's going to happen.
Benjamin, after the shock of this moment subsides, what does this moment do to Europe's involvement with Ukraine?
Well, I hope that all the European leaders watching that know that that could have been them. This is a fickle president, an impetuous president who is only looking out basically for number one. And so what Europe should realize is we have to structurally put in place the conditions whereby we support Ukraine to win and where we can defend ourselves without the United States. If in future the United States comes back onto the side of freedom, then all well and good. We would be better allies for being more strongly armed and able to take care of ourselves at that point. But for now, it's up to us. And this is also why the summit meeting tomorrow is extremely important.
Yeah, the UK plans a big Ukraine summit tomorrow, as you allude to. What do you expect to happen there?
I think it's difficult to say what we expect at the moment because, and perhaps this is a phrase we should eliminate from our vocabulary, there have been so many wake-up calls that have failed to materialize in Europe getting out of bed and actually leaving the house to get the job done. Tomorrow has to be now a chance to really move forward in practical terms. And there's a lot Europe could do. We could commit to arming Ukraine to win. We could double down on our advantage in emerging defense technologies to defend ourselves. And we could seize Russian assets to actually get a seat at the table. All of those things would be real action that would actually show Europe has got the message.
Benjamin Tallis, Director of the Democratic Strategy Initiative. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks very much. Good to be with you.
Right, let's bring in Tyson Barker, a foreign policy analyst who most recently served in the Biden-Harris administration working on Ukraine. Tyson, good to have you with us. If we can start from the beginning, what's your reaction to what happened in the Oval Office?
Well, it's clearly a moment that will live in infamy. President Trump had said it himself, and I think it's consistent with his leadership style at the end that this will make for good television. And I think it was, in some ways, a produced moment. I think in the run-up to this visit by President Zelenskyy, there were questions around whether the critical minerals agreement was being negotiated in good faith by the Trump administration. And the intervention by Vice President J.D. Vance in the Oval Office is, to be quite frank, in this way, highly irregular. So I think that there needs to be consideration as to whether or not this was actually premeditated.
One of the many things you allude to in this debate that was laid bare was the personality of Vice President J.D. Vance. What did you make of his involvement in last night's clash?
Well, he has become the tip of the spear for a specific faction of the Trump administration. He is somebody who speaks in an unvarnished way to the alt-right. He is somebody who's connected to alt-right media. And we see him trying to basically assume that role as ambassador for the bad cop side of the administration in multiple iterations, including at the Munich Security Conference a couple of weeks ago. So that was consistent with this role. But it's hard to imagine a situation in which he makes such a statement, and it was quite condescending, to be quite honest, to President Zelenskyy in the Oval Office without the explicit predetermined permission of his boss.
And yet, Tyson, Zelenskyy says that his relations with the United States can still be repaired. As hard as it seems to imagine at this moment, how vital is it for the transatlantic relationship that Ukraine and US kiss and make up here?
It's absolutely essential. The Ukrainians' war effort is completely dependent on the provision of materiel and economic support from the United States. There are still a number of lines of effort. Some have been paused, as we saw. Emergency energy assistance was paused yesterday. The provision of future weapons is under consideration to be paused. This would have an extremely deleterious effect on Ukraine's war effort. But I have to say, and this is where Zelenskyy has a unique brand of leadership, I mean, the man has stared death in the face and has a spine of steel, that they are not going to do anything, everything to win the U.S. support. What the Trump administration has done in this case and what President Trump has said is basically, you are now at an asymmetric, a weakened negotiating position. You are not in a position to ask for concessions in any kind of ceasefire. And that seems to indicate that Trump is biasing himself in any peace negotiations on the side of Vladimir Putin. And that is obviously very worrying for not only Ukraine, but also Ukraine's European allies who came out in force in the media yesterday after this event to reaffirm their support for Ukraine.
Yeah, Trump said Ukraine didn't have the cards to play. It did feel like he was also talking to Europe. Does Europe have any cards to play? If not, how does Europe arm itself with those cards to play in these negotiations?
Well, Ukraine's future and the beginning of this conflict, which started actually in 2014, was all about the movement of Ukraine geopolitically from Russia's orbit to the European Union's orbit. And in fact, if you remember the Maidan revolution, it was EU flags that the Ukrainians were waving on the Maidan. The European Union continues, with the UK and others, continues to be the biggest provider of assistance for Ukraine, economic and security, well, less security assistance, but economic assistance. But without the United States being a co-pillar in that, that would be a lot for Europe, Japan, Canada, and the UK to compensate. So the question is, do they have it within their stocks financially and also militarily to start to try to make that up? I think that there's thinking about that. You see that with Friedrich Merz's statement after the election, but it's going to happen on an extremely accelerated timetable.
Foreign policy expert Tyson Barker, it's been great to get your input. Thanks so much.
Thank you.